Alright, so I'm going to be doing another testing round. So this will be for DSi XL, and based on where I positioned it, this should be the final test. The third test that I run on these consoles. Okay. So it does look like I cleared 2 tests. I failed it on the first test because it had problems with the game card slot. It looks like I cleared it in test 2. I'll of course test it again, and if I don't detect any problems, then I would say it passed 2 tests. That's good enough for me. Looks like I replaced the digitizer, and not really sure what happened right there, but I'm going to assume, like I did for the last console I did, that maybe I just mixed them up because I did a bunch of blue consoles all at once. So the first thing I need to do is put on screen protectors. I'm just making sure that neither of them already have a screen protector, which they don't. The bottom screen is a brand new digitizer, which is very good, but the problem with these aftermarket digitizers is they have like a weird texture to them. You can almost kind of see it. It's almost like a matte texture, which in itself isn't a problem, but when you slide a stylus across it, it has far more friction than it should. So it's really hard to do inputs. This top screen lens is a little scratched up, just a tiny bit. There's just a bunch of hair scratches. There's a speck of dust underneath there. I'll have to see if that's a problem. I'll see if I can kind of capture that. There's that guy right there. Right sort of prominent. It's only a problem, as far as I'm concerned, it's only a problem if you can see it when the console's on. If it's sort of, what the word I'm looking for, if it sort of like diffracts light across the pixel or even blocks light of the pixel, then that's when I deem it a problem. Because just in the environment that I'm in, if I take off that lens, dust will just replace whatever dust I try to remove. Dust, skin flakes, what have you. So it just ends up being, you get it to the best possible point you can and just sort of live with it. I guess sounds a lot worse than I intend, but you just sort of say that, well, there's stuff underneath the lens, but you don't see it when the console's on. That's sort of the point that I try to get them to. So I'm going to do the first job of installing the screen protector. I really don't like using these wipes, but they're very handy. I could probably just buy this paper because all of these are dry at this point. I could probably just, I'm guessing these are just basically chem wipes, which I have. But I bought a big pack of them, so I might as well use them. So I'll soak this one in alcohol because it's dried. Just make sure everything is nice and clean. I do have a hair on the side of this digitizer that I'm going to see if I can try to remove. It got stuck between the, oh, and I think I just removed it. Well, how about that? It got stuck between the bezel and the digitizer when I attached it on. Probably just a stray eyebrow hair or something just fell off. So is the problem of being a big water balloon with hair. Alright, so pretty much every time I buy digitizers, it's always like these brand. Even the couple different sellers that I've purchased from, it's always this brand, so Maybe they're just the only ones that manufacture this stuff, or maybe there's just a warehouse full of a couple 100,000 of them. This is all you can buy. They work for my purposes. They might not be the most high quality, but they do the job. And that's really all I need them to do, because I don't think they make tempered glass screen protectors for the DSi XL platform, and considering how little support there is for the DSi just as a whole, I'll take what I can get. And right now all I can get is plastic. It works. It might scratch, but then you can also replace it without damaging the digitizer. Now the hardest part. That one actually went on very smoothly. Maybe I'm actually getting somewhat competent at this. Woo! I think that's my smoothest application in quite some time. Looks like it's maybe a little bit on this corner, but damn, look at me. I still would like to get some sort of apparatus that would help me center it a lot better. The bezel makes it really hard because I have to sort of line it up in both directions. Yeah. Not the easiest process. Alright, let's get the top screen. And if I do have to pop the lens off to try and get that piece of dust, if I see it, then I can do that. Trying to get like a weird smudge on the edge of the bezel. Or the edge of sort of that like colored border. I wonder if that's like a nick. Kind of at a point of no return, so I just have to commit. Lest I just make this. This one definitely did not go on as well. Let's see if I can salvage it. Looks like I kind of did the same thing it did to the other one where I got a little too close to this edge. Cool. What's happening is I'm not pulling up the film, I'm pulling up the whole screen protector. So now rogue bits of dust and debris are able to get in. My favorite. There we go. Well, definitely not as good. There's a couple air bubbles in here. I'll try and see if I can work them out. A lot of these air bubbles, though, are so far in the center that I don't really know if I can. What I can try to do, something I really don't want to do, because it almost always damages the screen protector, to try and lift it up and then really press it down. I'm not really too concerned if like the corner of the screen protector isn't fully down because that's against the colored border. Ow. I'm just going to grab a new pry tool because it will be sharp. Ooh. Okay, I think that did it. I think we're at a pretty good spot as far as the screen protector is concerned. Oh, actually, still like one little spot there. Wonder why it's not going away. I'll see if I can see it with the console on. I'll sort of make that sort of final call there. And it is kind of doing what it did. What I need to do is really get close to the edge when I apply the screen protector. These things have kind of tight tolerances, it would seem. So what's happening is it's just the side of the screen protector is touching the shell. So it's sort of pulling up on the screen protector just a little bit. So I want to try and see if I can just tuck the screen protector underneath the shell. To do that, I have to pull this off. Hopefully that's all that's needed. But I'll make that I'll make that decision when I turn the console on and look at the screen. If I can spot anything that disrupts any of the pixels. So that's really what's the most important part. And no, that didn't really help. I do have spare top screen protectors, but I'd rather not use them if I don't have to. This is definitely not a problem that I'm trying to fix, it's just definitely just something that bothers me. Okay, that's a lot better. It's not bubbling all the way up into the screen area. I am okay with that. Come on now. Okay. Now, that thrown away. Let me look at the screen. Yeah, that one spot, I see it. Or I see that speck. It'll be nigh impossible to try and see. I doubt it will be picked up in my camera, but it distorts that pixel. Just a little bit. Okay, fun times ahead. I don't know if I've pulled off this digitizer, or this top screen lens before. I'm going to kind of point to it with my suction cup, so I know where it is. Because once I take off this lens, it can make those little specks of dust kind of hard to see. Oh crap. Come on, let go. There you go. Accidentally grabbed the edge of the screen protector. That'll be a problem for later. So now to do my best to try and get as much dust as I can off of this. So that speck I see. Okay, I just got it. A lot of this stuff, when it sticks onto the LCD, it stays there. So I try to knock it free with a clean Q-tip. But this is just a losing battle. Because as soon as I do anything, more stuff appears. But I just try to get it to a point to where it's good enough. Oh, there's a hair right there. What? I thought I got it. Consequence of using cotton Q-tips is they leave fibers. That's all I got. I don't know if that will work. A lot of my fingerprinting will mask any sort of dust and debris if there's any underneath, which there is still. But the name of the game is, can I see any of these spots with the console on? Not so much getting rid of all of them. As much as I'd like a clean room to do all this, I just don't have it. I'm very envious of the people who can just clean off a screen, just let it sit for a little bit, and then put on a screen protector. Just kind of raw dog it like that. I can't do that in the environments I'm in. I have to be very quick. I see a spot right there that might be a problem. Those hairs might cause a problem. I'll just check. Let me run Mario Kart to see if I see it. So far it looks good. I don't see any of distortions based on those little specks of dust. Like, and I'm looking very specifically for them. Probably running a Mario Kart test isn't really going to provide any really fruitful pieces of data other than just if I can catch like a piece of the screen, sort of, or if I catch a pixel that seems to have like a persistent discoloration to it, kind of a little hard to explain. Okay, it looks good. Ugh, I really don't like doing screen protectors. Now we can get to the real meat and potatoes of the testing. So I will grab my testing sheet. This is sort of my assessment form, which has all of my testing parameters down here that I do. So I'll just be going through them one at a time to try and see, well, if it will pass all of these tests a final time. Let me grab the information I have on this console. This is assembled. This is console 4500 7. It's this one right here. Do I have any notes on it? Motherboard silver screw post is stripped. Okay, it's a fairly benign screw. It is up near the charge port, but the shell will more than compensate for that. And it has a new digitizer, which I can tell. No known issues. Okay. So let me... Well, I need to confirm that the motherboard that I have in here matches my records. I'm usually pretty good at making sure everything's matched, but mistakes happen. And it'll also give me a chance to put a little bit of tape on the backlight and digitizer connector. Those had tape on it from the factory, so if Nintendo deemed it important enough to put tape over, then why shouldn't I? Though they are not all seeing, as I would have rather them spent more resources on bolstering the top screen ribbon cable, but we're a bit far removed from this being on the production line. Okay, motherboard serial number is right there. $14X16012 UO1R2TT. Okay, that matches. Let me get all this written down. I really need to find where my pencil went. I really don't like doing this all in pen. Oh well. Motherboard serial number is 14X1. Usually don't have to erase anything, but having it as a safety net is always nice. 2TT, unit color blue. Shell serial number, I'll just grab that. WW450074859. Okay, I don't know the software version. I'll look at that here later. But my battery life is 4 hours and 5 minutes. Alright, put that off to the side here. So like I said, I'll put a bit of tape over these two connectors. Primarily the two small connectors. That's for the backlight for the bottom screen and the touchscreen. My best guess is that maybe in testing, Nintendo found that there was the chance of these latches maybe just popping loose. I don't really foresee that happening. Those latches are pretty robust. Like, you would have to drop it pretty hard for those latches to come off. And I think you would be having to worry about more things than these little latches if you dropped it that hard. But if their R&D department said that this might be a problem, or again, I'm just speculating, this might be for a wholly different thing, But if I had to guess and their R&D department said that, yeah, this might be a problem, it's worth spending the fraction of a penny to put just a tiny bit of tape on, then I think it's worth me spending a fraction of a penny to put some tape on. Everything else in here looks good. That screw, the motherboard silver screw, which is that screw, this screw is stripped. Yeah, it's got a little bit of bite to it, but it'll just spin in that screw post. It won't matter. The shell itself is robust enough to support the charge port. Get the little plastic clips on the bottom. Get this thing reassembled. Hopefully for the last time, though I tend to jinx myself when I say that. Oh, that's a black screw. Doesn't necessarily matter where I put that black screw, but just aesthetically, you flank them. You flank the game card slot with the black screws. At least on this color scheme. But they're all the same size. So I think I'm going to get two tests, or two sort of auxiliary tests out of the way. What I really need to do is just start writing them down if they clear this test, because I only need to perform this test once. So I've run into a couple consoles I've run into one console that has a weird issue, and I've run into several consoles that have screen issues. Not to sound super vague. One console I had, when it goes into sleep, it doesn't fully go into sleep. Instead, it sort of erratically flickers in and out of sleep, which is something I've never seen before, but it's something I do test for. So what I do is take a small magnet, place it over the component that's responsible for sleep, because when you close the console, there's a magnet in the speaker, and it interacts with this magnetically sensitive component there, puts the console into sleep. Sleep is represented by no activity on the screen. I don't have the volume up, so I can't hear anything on the speakers, and the blue light will sort of breathe in and out. So this console goes into sleep just fine, comes out of sleep when I remove the magnet. Next test is for image retention. So what I do is I'll go onto DSi Sounds and just sit on this screen for 2 minutes, give or take. I haven't really nailed down parameters that's good enough for this test, but I say a minute and a half is usually good enough. And what I'll be looking for is this checkered pattern in the back of both screens, and especially these large buttons. So what's going to happen is if these screens are getting old, or the current theory is if the screens are old, then one of the possible signs of that is them retaining an image not too dissimilar to like an OLED burn-in, which these are LCD displays, so I can't exactly describe the phenomena. I don't know if the liquid crystals are just like coagulating to the point to where they don't refresh correctly, or there's something else wrong with the display. I'm not going to pretend to try and understand that, but after about a minute and a half or so, if I swap over to the DSi settings menu, which is just two black screens, if I can make these patterns out in the background, and sometimes it can be very prominent, that's usually a pretty good tell that these one or both of the screens are starting to go bad, and usually they will manifest other issues, but even just that image retention can be very bothersome, as that will show up in video games that you play. Either it holds on to UI elements, or just different assets are just sort of on screen at all time in sort of a faded state. So I try to catch that with this test if I can. Usually the screen will sometimes show other issues like flickering or even aggressive issues like vignetting, but vignetting is pretty easy to catch. I'll give it about another, I don't know, 20 seconds or so. There's nothing really too scientific about this. It's just sort of like, a little while. And I guess I can already clear the microphone test because the waveform has been moving every time I talk. I always test the microphone before I put the console together because if the microphone is faulty in any way, then trying to replace it on an already assembled console is a bit difficult. Not impossible, but when you're trying to thread a cable around display ribbon cables, you run the risk of damaging them. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly swap over to the settings menu. And I do not see anything. So the backgrounds are nice and black. There is a bit. I do notice that it does kind of, there's these little like darker gray squares off to the left of these buttons. I don't think that actually means anything. I think that might just be part of the settings menu. But it is not like, if it were to retain the actual DSi sounds menu, you would see the big prominent buttons for the record and the play music, as well as the checkered patterns in the background. Another sort of thing I've just been sort of looking at is just doing soft refreshes of the console to see if I can spot that checkered pattern. Sometimes it will pop up, like sometimes you'll be able to see it faded. This one I actually don't see any. Other times you won't. I don't think this actually means anything if you do see the checkered pattern in the background. But it's just something I've kind of been testing on to just see if there's any sort of correlation between failing screens and if you see the patterns on when you soft reset. So cool. That console passed both of those tests. I usually perform those tests in my first round of testing, so I would have caught those and addressed them. I did not catch the version number when I went into here. It is 1.4.3U. Alright, so now I can actually get into my testing suite. So, start out with motherboard and power board, which essentially is just, can the console turn on? Can it reach the menu? And can it open up an application? Which it did. Next is tactile buttons. Those are all the face buttons and the shoulder buttons. For that, I use a R4 card with a homebrew piece of software, where every time I press an input, a little light pops up. That's a lot better than me trying to do this in a video game. Like, I think if I were to do this, I would probably do it in a Pokemon game. I think that's one of the only games that I'm aware of where you can easily use all the inputs in the PC. Okay, so I'll just sort of press the inputs 10 or so times. Nothing really too crazy. Face buttons are usually always fine. There's usually only problems when there's water damage, if something gets spilt on the console and it goes into the little spaces around the buttons onto the motherboard. Then the shoulder buttons are ones I usually put special attention on because they tend to be the ones that have the problems. I'm sort of pressing the button all over the button, so to speak. It's sort of pressing it on like the outer edge of the button and then sort of moving towards the inner side of the button, again, so to speak. Interesting. I do kind of get like false inputs if I lightly press on it. It happened twice. Oh. So I'm not clicking. The button hasn't actually actuated yet. I suppose that's not a bad thing if you intend to press the R button. I can't really reliably repeat it. Like if I'm right against the actuation point, sometimes it will pop up. I would say an overly sensitive shoulder button is kind of like the best case scenario. I'm trying to think, like, I don't think I've seen this yet, so it's whether or not I should deem this as an issue. I don't think it is. Maybe it's still a pretty, like, good shape R button. If it's overly sensitive, I think almost that is a plus, but I could see you accidentally doing a false input if, like, you have your finger resting on the button and it accidentally inputs. But I'm having to press down all the way to the actuation point in order for it to go down. Like, not... So now I'm just sort of tapping it. Oh. Trying to see sort of where it flashes. Yeah, right there. It's not even actuated. That was maybe 3/4 of the button press. Huh. To be honest, I really don't know how to interpret this. It's not like the button is bad or failing. It's just sort of... They're not false inputs either. Like, I'm pressing the button. It's just not to the actuation point. I don't know if the button's damaged in any way. I don't think it would be. For it to be kind of bowed out a little. Or just it's really sensitive. I could do a round of cleaning on it. I really don't know what that would mean. Like, if there's something... Like, I wonder if maybe, if there is maybe a little bit of corrosion on that button, it's making it a little more conductive? That seems kind of strange. I'm going to think on that for a little bit. So I'll do the L button. I might end up just having to do another cleaning round on that button and just see if it changes anything. I'll do that after this button and see if I can still reproduce that. That just might be a really quirky button. Or that little switch is just quirky. L button seems to be good. What's funny is it's almost like completely opposite to the last console I did, where it was having hard time reading soft presses, where now this one's overly sensitive. So the L button isn't that way. Okay, I have no problem with the L button. That R button's very perplexing though. So I'm just gonna clean it. I mean, I really don't think that's gonna do anything. Worst case scenario is I replace the button. Which really is, calling it the worst case scenario kind of is a bit hyperbolic. It's really not that big of a deal, since the boards are separated from the entire console. I don't even really make note of it. It's so benign. So usually, well, kind of unfortunately what that means is I need to put it through another round of testing if I'm gonna fault the R button. The second time I've had to do that, but, you know. I'd rather not deal with a return. I'd rather have a good console that I approve of go out into the world instead of me hoping that whoever buys it doesn't notice, or not so much doesn't notice, but it not being a big deal for them. Would it be a big deal for me? I frankly don't think I would notice it if I didn't have diagnosing software. So, interpret that what you will. Since I see it in my diagnosing software, I will try to remedy it. Oh, I see. Okay, hang on. Let me grab my microscope. So I think my corrosion theory might have a little more merit than I would have thought. Oh, I'm not even plugged in. Alright, so let me look at this button here and get the cable out of the way. So why I said it has some merit is I detect some rust. That's not a big issue if it's just surface rust. The contacts look really good, but I'm guessing if there's just some crap that's gotten inside of it. Alright. Just gonna kind of look at it, maybe scrape at it a little. See how bad it is. I mean, it is just some surface rust. Alright, what I usually do for cleaning these buttons, I will submerge them and then just press them a whole bunch of times while submerged completely in rubbing alcohol. With the intention of just kind of using the actuation force to try and scrub the internal contact, so to speak, and sort of flush it out just with the suction force of that little switch depressing and reforming. I think that will do it. I'm not too worried about the surface rust. The game card or the SD card slot looks like it's still in really good shape. So with that being said, I'm not really too worried. And the R button did work. It just worked a little, almost too good. I think right here is just a little bit of, you don't know what that is. Just a little bit of wear on the metal surface. Like, the switch itself feels good and it sounds good. And that surface rust shouldn't get any worse. I'm gonna grab a little bit of rubbing alcohol and rub off these connectors. What I'm going to do is fold my paper towel. The battery back in. I'll go back into my diagnosing software to see if that did anything positive to the shoulder button. If it didn't change anything, I'm probably going to replace it. It's not that big of a deal for me to replace it. I have plenty of spares. I just don't think I've ever replaced a shoulder button because it was overly sensitive. I just find that to be rather an interesting symptom to display. I've replaced plenty that were not sensitive enough. And maybe even just them being oversensitive might not even matter. Whoa, interesting, okay. It's possible that it might still be a little wet. Just turn my console on and off again. As to why I didn't catch this in my first 2 rounds of testing, I can't really say. I don't know. I wasn't there. Or, well, I was there, but that was a while ago. But it's sort of a good justification as to why I do several tests and not just one. So yeah, I'm going to replace that R button. It's just behaving very strangely. I'm guessing it's still wet, that's why it has a continuous input. But even ones that I've dried, I don't know. I'll make the claim that it's still wet, but even ones that I've cleaned and put back into consoles, very similarly to what I did not behave like that, so... I'm just gonna replace it. Throw it in my junk pile, and either I'll look into replacing the switch itself, or just, you know, junk it, because replacement switches are tend to have their own set of quirks. Well, I tend to misplace tools I just recently had in my hands. Oh well, this will work. It's the I don't know what befell my guitar pick. Yeah, that would have been for the left anyway. Okay. I'll try to find one that doesn't have surface rust in it. I guess surface rust is a pretty good indicator that it's been water damaged, but sometimes it's just that the surface metal that's rusted. I do kind of want to probe into this, literally. So, just to see if it's just reporting a constant press. I'm not reading a constant press. Trying to hold two probes one-handed is mighty difficult. Yeah, this button's just behaving strangely. It was missing inputs according to my multimeter, but I'm not going to say my multimeter is gospel, because just how the way I was holding it, it's possible I wasn't making great connection, but I'll just junk it. Alright, I have like a quart bag full of these little guys that I harvested off of other consoles. Brush off the connector. I want to clean out my little cup of rubbing alcohol while I let that connector dry. 91% rubbing alcohol, so it'll go away pretty quickly. Now this button looks physically fine, so I'm not going to worry about trying to test it. Like outside, I'm not going to put my multimeter on it. It'll be a much more solid, much more reliable test to do it in software, instead of me trying to just fumble around. Alright, let's try that again. Get my diagnosing software up again. Alright, that's testing really good, but just sort of trying to stick to a protocol where it needs to pass twice. I'm just going to make notes that R button failed and replaced on third test. So really what that means is I just have to do one more round of testing on it before I approve it for sale. I will, however, go through the rest of the testing suite, because the more sort of A-OK approvals I can give on the other testing components, then I think is an even stronger indication that there's no issues with it. So, tactile buttons done. Next is touchscreen, which I did not need to take my R4 card out for. Now, touchscreen I test using this homebrew application, which turns the bottom screen into a sketchpad. I like this better than Flipnote Studio because not only does Flipnote Studio not ship on every single console I have, for a reason I can't really figure out. I don't know if it was an update that Nintendo pushed through that's currently not available anymore, or just a revision of the firmware that doesn't have it, whatever the reason is. Flipnote Studio will have an icon on that bottom corner, so I can't accurately test that bottom corner without accidentally hitting it, but if you have no other options, Flipnote Studio works. What I'll do is run my stylus across the perimeter of the screen just to see if I get a solid box. This looks like it's off. It's sort of shifted off to the side here. It did bump there on the corner. I think that was just me. I don't know if I slipped off the edge. Nah, I probably just fumbled. So what I'm looking for is something kind of similar to that, where I'll be sliding across the border and then there's just sort of like an erratic input, and then I'm not able to do any inputs in here. A dead zone of sorts where the touchscreen is actually bad. In this case, I can do inputs in there. That was obviously just for the sake of examples. I've also had other touchscreens where you could do a straight line down and it will shoot inputs over onto this side of the screen, or maybe this side of the screen is the only place you can get inputs no matter where you're touching, and that could be a connection issue, less of a touchscreen issue, but either way it would be an issue. And I'm just looking for other just erratic sort of inputs. So I do swirls around and I'm not detecting anything. Everything looks good. So that passes. It is a new digitizer, so it better. I don't think I've had a new digitizer fail. I've had third-party digitizers ship with consoles that I've taken apart, and those digitizers had problems, but it's sort of useless to speculate where those came from. Next is speaker, microphone, and headphone jack. I do kind of a combo test on that. So I have a SD card that I have a song loaded up on. So this will also serve as a test of the SD card slot as well. And there it is. So the SD card slot works. I'll just listen to both speakers. And then find where I put my earbuds. Here they are. Both speakers work. I'll plug in the headphone jack. No sound of the speakers. And I can hear out of both headphone jacks, or headphone buds, earbuds, these things. Now, I already confirmed that the microphone works. It was just sort of, it was catching my inputs as I was doing the image retention test, but just for the sake of completion. La 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 la! La 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 la! La 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 la! Microphone works. Like I said before, I do test the microphone before I put the console together, just to make sure I'm not putting faulty components in. I'll turn down the volume so I'm not getting blasted by the... Okay, the volume down kind of caught for a second. I think it caught a little on the shell. Maybe it was just, it didn't shift into position. Okay, I can't repeat it, so I think we're good there. Next is camera. Basically, all I look for is, do the cameras boot? Do they show an image? The image isn't going to be great. This is a DSi camera, but both work. That's also another thing I test before I put the console together, just based on how the ribbons are coiled. If the cameras were bad, I would have to fully disassemble the entire console again. I don't want to do that. Or I don't like doing that more than I need to. So the next is the charge port. So what I'll do is plug in my little USB volt tester right there. I'll first test if the software indicator works. Should. Software indicator says it's charging, solid orange light, I am getting an amp draw. So what I do next is I'll rotate the charge cable inside the port to see if that orange light ever flickers off, which it doesn't. This is the test to see if the charge port has any issues with its solder joints. Sometimes if you wiggle it around and that light flickers off and on, or if you have to hold the charge cable in a specific spot for that orange light to come on, then either the charge port itself is having issues or the solder joints are just broken. That all works. Next is the game card slot and SD card slot. Already proved that the SD card slot works. I don't think I need to go through any more rigorous tests on the SD card slot. I figure if it can read a song, it should function normally. It detected the SD card slot, or the SD card, didn't have any problems with it, and it played a piece of content off the SD card. I say that is good enough, at least to the extent of my knowledge. So for the game card slot, I have a stack of shovelware games right here. Well, it might be unfair to call Nintendogs a shovelware game, but just a lot of very low value games, all in various different conditions that I just use as sort of the average testing of game cards. So what I do is I'll get the game card, I'll just insert it normally. So click, it appears. What I'll do is I'll then press on it slightly and shift it side to side. It has a tiny bit of play. And then what I'll do is increase the pressure until I go past the actuation point of the ejection mechanism and just see if the game card ever disappears from the menu. So I just hit the actuation point. At that point, it's point of no return. The game card's coming out. But it read it all the way down. I'll do it again. All right, read it all the way through. So then what I'll do after that is smack the back of the console against my open palm. And really what I'm trying to simulate is if you're playing Nintendogs, you go to sleep and you shove this into your backpack. And I don't know, you hit a bump and it shakes the console. If the game card disconnects, either your console will just flat out crash or freeze. Which in this era of video games where manual saves were sort of law, you would be screwed if you were in the middle of something and didn't save before going to sleep. So I'm just going to do that same test on just a bunch of different game cards. I did fail this console on the... Let me check that again. I failed the game card slot. I didn't specify why. But I failed it during the first round of testing, which means I probably did a round of cleaning on the game card slot. And if that cleaning means it passed the second round of testing, hopefully that means it passes the third round of testing. So the game cards were disconnecting because I had them ejected. I can't exactly show both sides of the console at once. So far, so good. There are a couple games I'm keeping an eye out for. There's a few games in this pile that tend to have a harder time reading than others. But the amount of variables that I can be testing for, like, is the game card in good shape? Are the pins in good shape? Are the pins inside my console in good shape? Are they bent? Are they clean? I'm hopefully trying to catch all of those, because I know all these games work. And also, smacking the back is also a good test for the battery as well, because if the battery dislodges and powers down the console, that's a problem. But this console is doing very good. I haven't hit those troublesome cards. There's a couple. I think I have 3 troublesome game cards. Either they just have a hard time reading for whatever reason, or I think one of them had a little bit of corrosion on the pins. I'm just hoping my sample size is good enough to cover every cart that you could possibly put in. At least condition-wise. Bejeweled 3 sometimes has a problem, so I'm glad to see that passes. The next one, Wonder Pets, after this game, can sometimes have problems. Same with the... Oh, I guess I put my 3 troublesome game cards right after another. But it reads all 3 of them perfectly. Very pleased. So that game card cleaning, a game card slot cleaning that I did was very successful. Either that, or maybe I bent up the pins just slightly. Because the pins are just basically little little knuckles. When you slide the game card over, it sort of depresses them a little just to make sure it has solid contact. And I figure that over the decade that this console's been out, just enough game cards are sliding over those pins that they just get bent down a little. Just normal use. But this console read them all just fine. I have no problems. I can't seem to even create a problem. Even like pushing the game card past the actuation point, which is unrealistic because at that point the game card's coming out. So if the game card disconnects while it's past that actuation point, it really doesn't matter because the game card's going to fly out anyway. That said, last is Wi-Fi. I just basically make sure that the console can connect to an access point. I can't connect to my home Wi-Fi because the security is too new, or the band is too new, whatever the actual explanation is, but I can connect to my phone, but I'm currently using it as a camera. I can set it to a 2.5 hertz band, so, or gigahertz or whatever, and that will connect to DSi consoles, but I've never had a console fail that, and I don't know why it would. Because if there was a problem with the Wi-Fi in this system, there would be other problems being manifested other than it just not being able to connect to a access point. So this console passed. Everything but the R button I need to test one more time. So this console needs to go back into my little testing area for one more time. I at least have screen protectors on. That's usually a headache I have to deal with every time I put these consoles together. Though it is a bit of a shame that I can't really do anything with this console yet. But I have no doubt in my mind it will pass the next round of testing and I'll be able to put it for sale. So that will be all I can do for right now, or at least all I want to do for right now.